everybody. Thanks for coming back to the Xanadu Review. My name is Prester John Andrews, but as always, you can just call me PJ. Well, today with me I have a special guest. His name is David Rodgers, and he writes the Chesterton's Fence Substack. And David is a personal friend of mine, and also kind of my writing mentor. He's the one who actually encouraged me to start writing on Substack and in general. So I'll say, if you like what I do and like reading me, say thank you to David. And if you don't, well, you know where to send the hate letters to.
I'll take the blame as well. That's fine.
Yeah. So David, do you want to introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little about your writing, your books, and then we'll kind of jump into everything else.
Yeah. David Rodgers, the two books I've written. Well, some poetry's been out there too, some nonfiction, but most of the important writing has been two books. First was Peaceful Meridian. This was my first book. It was a memoir of my time being in the Navy and also being in the anti-war movement at the same time. So I was in the military, 2004, 2008, right at the height of the Iraq War kerfuffle. And so I wrote a short kerfuffle, to use the very highly technical State Department term. And so thin book, but yeah, it was kind of interesting being both in the military and against the military at the same time. And after that, then I wrote a short novel called The Layoff House that came out, it's 3 years ago now. So it's about I guess I'm due for another one, which is being worked on. That was, it's funny, I was thinking about this before we got on. It actually has to do with the machine, actually, because it's about a group of people, all different backgrounds, we all work for the same company, all get laid off, and they all have kind of living together and trying to survive. And it's about living in a world where you're trying to make your own way, but everything's kind of stacked against you, or it's hard to be adult. It's hard to be independent, and whether that power against you is racism or the corporation or the school board or even your HOA. There's always somebody who wants to stop you from being yourself and from really being truly independent. So that's the two main pieces of writing, with more on the way soon. And yeah, started back a couple of years ago.
You won an award, didn't you? If I recall, what was that?
A excerpt from Layoff House did get published this year in So It Goes, which is the journal of the Kurt Vonnegut Museum and Library, which I thought was a really nice feather in my cap, finger brag a little bit. It's everything's already on Substack, and there's nothing to knock on Substack. There's some amazing writers, but it's old enough where it's kind of cool to see something in print from an actual journal, and you look at the board and who's on the board to this library and museum. You're like, oh dang, like Lewis Black is on there. He probably reviewed this and said, yeah, this doesn't suck. Let's publish this guy. So,
and that guy's not shy with his opinions.
He knows he definitely is not. So, it's writing is one of the things I do. It's part of my soul.
Yeah, no, it's as I've told you, it's a book that I really enjoyed, and that was something I referenced in one of my first articles that ever got any traction. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people are kind of coming to right now. And was that was not so long after we moved out. We lived, for the audience, David is a close personal friend. Me and my wife lived with him for about what was it, 3 or 4 months, something like that.
Yeah, 3 summers ago, I think it was now.
Yeah, after the mouse incident, it was very like Victorian, that our apartment complex got infested with mice, and we fought a valiant battle against them and probably killed a couple dozen mice, but ultimately the mice won and we had to leave.
Very, very Dickensian. PJ was on my front porch with his little gammy leg, his little hat in hand. Could I please stay here?
But you gotta say, you gotta give it to the mice. They just wanted it more.
They did. Your dogs are still disappointments. Born to be terriers, born to be rat chasers, and they didn't do a bloody thing.
They're too, not unlike the modern man. They're just a little too soft. But maybe the joke is on those mice, because I checked recently, the rent just skyrocketed in that apartment. So
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's their problem now.
Right? Exactly. Charge the mice.
I don't know. Do you want to talk a little bit about the writing and the creative process? Like, what before we get into some of the other meat of it? Like, what are some of the things that first inspired you to write? What are some of your early influences? What first made you want to do it?
I've always been a bit of a scribbler. Even though I didn't really think about being brave enough to try to be published until in my mid-40s. I was always writing as a kid. I wrote short stories in second grade. Did a lot of really cool writing in high school and things like that. Some poetry, short stories. And then just kind of gave up. Didn't really follow through on that dream for various personal reasons. And finally, I think it was in my mid-40s. Of course, it's been like all writers, an avid reader. I mean, you know my library. We swap books all the time. So I was reading it was a Dave Eggers book. What was that? The Square, the Cube. What was that one about the internet company? Anyway, a friend of mine lent it to me. She's like, "Oh, this is great," and I'm like, "This is a horrible book. This is a huge name author," and I'm like, "I can write better than this. My cat with a pencil stuck with its butt can write better than this." And so kind of
Depending on the cat.
that's true. The older one,
The
probably
orange
could.
cat, I
Younger
don't.
one, no, he's one of these Clorox. So yeah, I don't think he's gonna play
It's not gonna make it.
together. Nope. He's only got 3 lives left, as it was. Plus, of course, quick aside, it's Advent season, so the candles are up. So you know how it is with candles.
So he's trying to set the
fire.
house on fire still.
Yes, I switched over to tea lights, which I thought would be easier, but actually I realized I was just flaming hockey pucks for him. So it was not. Experiment
So you
failed.
might have to stay with us is the takeaway soon.
Yeah,
Your
I might turn off
your house might get burned down by your cat.
likely. Yeah, so sat down. I'm like, okay, I wanted to tell my story of being in the Navy, so I sat down, wrote Peaceful Meridian. So actually, before that, I started doing some poetry. I lived in San Antonio for a little while. I started going to a poetry open mic there, and found out that actually people liked what I was doing. And it was, of course, nerve-wracking to do sort of public speaking in front of strangers in a new town, but yeah, I got a good vibe off it and started writing stuff and started getting some poetry published. My first published piece was 3 poems I submitted to the Heroes Voices Veterans Poetry Contest, and I got 2nd place, and the other 2 actually got honorable mentions. So I was like, holy crap, I can do this. Again, like a whole board of people, including like a whole bunch of people from the City Lights bookstore in San Francisco were on this going. And I'm like, wow, if I can impress those people, maybe I'm actually not bad at this. Yeah, then read Dave Eggers, got pissed off, decided, you know what, I can write books too. And yeah, so
It's a revenge story in a way.
it is. It wasn't from glorious, like I want to share with the world. I'm like, man, this stuff sucks. I can do better than this. So, you write what you want to see.
Well, it seems to be more and more common these days, and I've talked to other published authors on the podcast and other just people that I've read that it's just in some ways the bar is so low that you might as well try, right?
Oh gosh, I read almost no contemporary fiction, some nonfiction, which of course we're going to cover here shortly, but what I've heard is it's terrible. I know even just structurally terrible. Like my mother reads a lot of contemporary fiction, and she was in the publishing industry on the legal side doing legal publishing. So she was an editor. She'll call me, just has these rants about just how awful like the formatting is. Random breaks, just things that just make no sense. Yeah, even like there's no spell check. She's like, these are professional books from the big 5 publishers, and they're just full of spelling errors. There's a lot of stuff out. There's a lot of people out there in the main publishing industry who just don't care, and they'll turn out slop. They won't even edit it. And I think there's a great niche for those of us who are on the outside, self-publishing, to not only to write, I think, what people actually want to read, not what the editors, the big 5, think people want to read, but also to put care into it, like to really put some craft into it. And I think readers will respond to that. Like, oh man, this is a well put together book.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's something about Substack that does kind of make me hopeful, since it seems like there's not unlike yourself, some interesting self-published people, as well as just like people doing serialized fiction or nonfiction stuff, that removing the gatekeepers. I don't think it's ever going to replace that traditional model, but at the very, it'll maybe um, inject some new blood, since kind of I think your book is the only contemporary non-genre fiction that I've read in I don't know how long.
Yeah. And I thank you for that. I know your sister loved it too. Pretty much everyone. It's got really good reviews on, it's carried on Ingram's. You can find it on bn.com and Amazon. It's out there. It's been reviewed. It's been reviewed well. It's just, as always with self-publishing, it's an uphill. Like you were talking, last week to Lisa, it's an uphill battle. It's tough to get out there and run things. Yeah.
Well, I think what I said is, I think it must have been to you before. It's a little bit like jazz in the sense that maybe increasingly literary fiction, it's going to be like a niche thing for people who really like it.
I think it'll always be there. I think there'll be the slop. There'll always be, especially like the big five will be just AI slop, and there'll be people who'll just eat up the AI slop, and that's fine. That's their thing. But I think there will always be an audience for well-crafted art, whether that's writing or cocktails. I mean, you can buy a pre-made cocktail, or you can go both to your house or my house. We'll make you one. Or I was reading something today about the Netflix merger, and it's just people like it's gonna make it even worse. And people like, oh, it's gonna be the collapse of the studio system, and I was like, well, partly, but also they're gonna be around because they'll just keep churning out garbage, and somebody will be watching that garbage. But that just makes I think more room for the rest of us.
I wonder at what point you don't even really need actual creatives. I mean, there's probably, and this is not, I guess, wouldn't necessarily be my thing, but I do think about I think there's been like I forget what it was, but recently there was like an AI generated like short form video platform thing. And I wonder if that'll just be the future, that it'll exist in some case. Like there's a Netflix type services like I want a action that also is a Western and a romance, and it has this much diversity or not diversity. Here are the themes I like, don't like, and you can just use all these tags and it'll spin it up for you. And at that point, like, will there even be, I'm sure there still will be mass media, since something like that. Like I'm less of an AI doomer in that sense, that I feel like there's an upper level of quality that you can get out of something like that. But it'll be interesting to see maybe those type of people who just want to see like really specific things will silo themselves in that sense with that technology.
I think as it gets really high quality, you're absolutely right. People will be like, give me, the Luke Skywalker movie I did not see, and it'll spit something out.
Which, it has its uses.
Slop or hotel room watching, but that's about it.
Yeah, because I promised the audience this will be my last things me and David do in real life reference. So it's still good radio listening. But the last two D&D games that I ran, I just like, here's my idea, Chat GPT, give me the stats and everything for it. Because we in our game we've been playing for almost 10 years now, and I wrote very elaborate things from scratch for about 6 or 7 years, and now it's like, all right, I'm good for that. I'm older now. I don't have the time, so it's a good time saving measure for something like that. It's like, here's my idea. Give me all the stats. I'm not looking all that up. Just give it to me. But that having been said, I think there's probably diminishing returns, because it's not like we're doing like high concept fantasy. It's literally just like, all right, give me a dungeon crawl. We're 4 or 5 adults who want to hang out and play a D&D game on a Saturday afternoon. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, 2 or 3 hours. It's not like when you're kids you could play for 6 hours nonstop and Saturday night in your parents' basement. We just don't have that kind of energy anymore. It's more a social thing, and simple. Roll some dice, swing some swords,
Mhm.
and it's all
None of
good.
us have a basement either.
No, we do not. Not in Colorado. There's too much radon. So
It's true. All right. So one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about, that I think is interesting, that people might want to listen into, as well as just where the culture is going right now. Because you recently, within the last couple of years, converted to Christianity after like a lifetime of atheism, being raised as an atheist. And I guess, it's interesting because I have kind of the opposite of experience where I was raised very, very religious. My dad was a pastor. I come from like a long line of, either pastors or very strongly and very much enmeshed in the church. But I kind of grew out of it and I went super hardcore atheist for a long time. And I'm becoming a lot more open to it now, and rethinking a lot of my, presuppositions about religion. But I've always enjoyed our conversations about this, and I think it'd be worth having publicly, just because it's interesting that we came from such different perspectives, but have kind of met in the middle, so to speak. So if you want to talk about how you came to religion, say as much or as little as you're comfortable with, but just that it's a very different background, and coming from that, like not even boomer, like your silent generation parents, who are like some of the first generations to really be non-religious. So it's an interesting convergence and really speaks to our moment, I think.
I am as surprised as anybody it happened. It was probably one of the last things I ever thought would ever happen to me. It's been about 18 months or so. So my background is I grew up Chicago suburbs and exurbs, big blue city, like big blue state. My parents are both cradle Catholics, that is, born Catholic. Well, I know my mom was. My dad, his family was religious. They sort of bounced around from church to church. We're a little bit wandering people on that side, but my dad is silent generation. My mom is like the very, very first of the boomers, born 47. I should know this. My dad's born 44, so they grew up religious. My dad, he always changes the story. I think the story, as far as I know, at least the last time he told it, was that his family stopped going to church at some point, but they never told him why, because he was still pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was because his oldest brother passed from cancer in like the early 60s. So I think the family just lost faith. I never knew Uncle Frank, unfortunately, but I think that was a big part of it. My mother went to Catholic grade schools. When they got to high school, Grandpa didn't really have the money to pay for private high school, so then she had to go to public high school, and boom, her mind found out evolution and all these other things that they just weren't allowed to know about. So between that and the general 1960s, early 70s growing counterculture, they became rabidly anti-religious. So my mother is your pretty typical second wave feminist, true blue man hater. And, she blames everything ever happened to her horribly in her life on the Pope. I don't know which one of the popes, maybe all of them, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, the Catholic Church kept her from her dreams and instead told her to become
so I just
a wife and
imagine
mother.
like each pope giving another one a dossier on her, like every time he's ordained.
It's in the Vatican archives. There's the David's mothers.
Mm-hmm.
The folder's pretty thick by now. Beware of this woman. So, and how we shall continue to destroy her life. So she, instead of pursuing a dream to become like a big time lawyer, or she loved Jane Goodall, so she wanted to become, like a famous monkey scientist or something. And she had to be dragged down into motherhood and marriage by the church. So, and then on my dad's side, my dad is basically George Carlin. That's his attitude. He's a very left libertarian. He's just like, it's all a scam. They're all just trying to tell you what to do. It's people just trying to get money out of you and run your life for you. So, you know, we don't need that. It's all just a bunch of baloney. So it's a very anti-religious house. And weirdly enough, though, it's funny. Me and my sister were baptized. We were baptized as Lutherans in the late 1970s because I think, and again, family stories sometimes are still kept a secret. But what I put together after the fact was that my maternal grandfather, who grew up in a Catholic orphanage, and all my cousins on that side were also raised Catholic. I'm guessing at one point, Grandpa told my mom's like, "Your children have not been baptized," so she's finally was guilted into it. So,
Hmm. Very Catholic.
well, we're not going to go Catholic. So who hates Catholics more than anyway? Lutherans. So we went, and about a year and change, we went through catechism, and me and my sister got baptized, and then that was it. Then we never went back ever again. So we were given kid Bibles that we've just been dragging around from house to house forever, but it was never part of our family, and everything. He was home recently. Just there's a reflective anti-Christianity. Anytime it comes up, it's just it just there's a snide comment about it. We were there watching. I was texting your wife about this. We were watching Rick Steves' Christmas, and he was, of course, going to Europe and all the different carols, all the different Christmas traditions. My dad was snarling at the TV. Look at what we lost. What do you mean? Look what we lost with Christianity. I'm like, you mean we lost Christianity, or no? We lost because of Christianity. The idea was that Europe lost something by becoming Christian. I mean, it was they really hate it to that extent.
He would love the Substack Vitalists.
Probably. But so yeah, so I was basically raised atheist. Secular humanism, just be good, just be nice. Which secular humanism, it's kind of a fading ideology, but started by the boomers, Gen X got it both barrels. It's basically Christianity stripped of God and Jesus. It becomes just a moral teaching. Be charitable, turn the other cheek, don't be violent, always be passive, always be nice, don't ever be angry or violent for any reason whatsoever. So did it work? I don't know. Obviously it didn't, which we'll get to. But because of my dad's work for Japan Airlines, we always had kind of a strange Asian background to our family as well. So we were aware of Buddhism and things like that. So when I got into my late teen years and really my 20s, I started reading like the Beats and Kerouac and all those guys and Allen Ginsberg. And I want to emulate them with their freedom. So I started to look into Buddhism and started meditating, practicing that, in particular Theravada Buddhism. Most of the Beats did Zen. Ginsberg did Tibetan style, but I went Theravada, which is the Southeast Asian, Thailand, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka, and did that for a long time. I spent some time actually as a lay resident at a Buddhist monastery right before I moved to Colorado, actually. That was actually acceptable to my family because for my family, as long as Buddhism is fine, there's no God. So it's okay. And it's kind of cool. It's very 1960s kind of hippie thing. So that was acceptable. So that was kind of my thing for a while. But yeah, so about 18 months ago, I guess maybe about close to 2 years now, I was getting to Chesterton, hence my Substack handle. Basically as a way to analyze this leftist background I was growing up in. And Chesterton was also a Christian apologist. So reading him, I was like, I probably should sit down and start reading the Bible. I feel like something's drawing me to start doing this. So start reading it cover to cover, starting with the New Testament. And it's funny because without a real background, coming with a completely fresh set of eyes, I think in some ways is easier because you kind of have that converge energy. So started to really look into it and read ancillary stuff. And one night, this is when things get mystical, I had a very strong dream, like a true lucid dream, where I saw Saint Catherine of Siena. I knew it was her. Now she didn't say anything to me. I don't have any messages to give to the world or anything like that. But it was one of those like absolutely true dreams. And woke up in the middle of the night going, "What the heck was that?" Because remember, I have no background at all religious, but she's actually there in a proper Dominican nun's habit. I'm like, why? Why would this happen to me? As we do these days, grab my phone, middle of the night, look up Wikipedia, patron saints of people who are ridiculed for their faith. I started literally just laughing in the dark, like, okay. Yeah, I'm being sent a message. So I better take this a lot more seriously. And started poking around, and I wanted something that was more on the Orthodox side, more on the traditional side, and looked up a local Anglican Catholic church and started going there, and came confirmed in. And actually, I'm serving the altar as well, but read the Bible cover to cover. And yeah, it's just been really an interesting journey. And I knew it was right because the very first time I went to church, and of course, it's a communion, but it's a closed communion. I've never been anything with a communion at all. I have no idea what to do. People are going up there. I'm just sitting there, just praying. And we got to the point of the confession, and confess your sins to God. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not worthy. I'm a damaged person, but I'm forgiven. And right there, 50 years, nearly 50 years of depression just gone instantly. That's it. I mean, growing up in that leftist background and being a straight white male, you get hammered on even by your own family, and it's just a whole other. And of course, you struggle. That's why I didn't write for so long, because I didn't have the confidence to do it, and all that was just lifted immediately. So all these, and I have more stories like that. All these little things have just kind of constantly kind of pushed me that direction and kept me going and telling me this is a true thing. And the shocking thing coming from a completely atheist / Buddhist background was to find out how much of Christianity is true, is absolutely 100% true.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a really beautiful story for one, and it's something that it's always struck me how it's a very unique experience that you have to be like a middle-aged white guy from America for whom Christianity is almost alien. I've known people who have either like converted to Christianity or at least become academically interested in it, who are like, from, other countries or were Jewish or something like that. But it's interesting to see somebody of your background who is, ostensibly more or less, from that Christian cultural tradition to who had just like almost no context for other than the deconstruction, and I'm sure this is something we'll get into because we also want to talk about Paul Kingsnorth's book as well as Tom Holland's rather. But I think there is something to be said about how that Christian tradition, that Christian moral framing never goes away. That self-flagellation, even like a secular liberal way, is very Christian. And that's something that really struck me. I don't want to get too ahead of a horse when I was reading Dominion about, because I kind of just for a little context, I was going to say the fact that like there's nothing I think in the Western European American, whatever you want to say, tradition that is really truly alien to Christianity. And I think Tom Holland said, the only self-conscious like Western attempt at deviation from the Christian tradition was, the 20th century Germans, and they are like, shorthand for moral evil, so much so that like Hitler is like secular Satan. But my background was almost the opposite, really, because I I came from a very heavily Christian tradition. My mom's side of the family was Catholic, but we much more stayed with my dad's side, which is like Church of Christ, which is a like Southern Baptist offshoot. And we did something. The tradition is like consent-based baptisms. They don't believe in child baptisms. I was baptized in a lake at like the age of 13. It was very, very kind of like that old school Southern Christianity type of thing. I won't dox myself specifically to the audience, but I've told David I have people in my family who are big names in like the Southern gospel world as like writers or musicians or like songwriters. So that was very, very much in my blood, metaphorically and literally. And that was so much of my life for so long that I kind of around, I don't know, probably 13 or something like that. A little earlier than I really started to chafe at it, but that's when I was like, I'm an atheist now, and I would have loved your parents because I was, it was the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I loved, Richard Dawkins and Peter Hitchens and all those types, and I went so hard at that and that materialism for so long, and it's probably when we first met because that was about 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I was still very much super lefty, and in a lot of ways I still am because I feel like I haven't changed a lot of my core positions other than that that purely material, like there's only logic, there's only science. Christianity was just an oppressor, which, and again, ironically, like that attitude is very much, at least from the Christian tradition that I came from, where it's like it's even very anti-Catholic because like, well, the additional canons that the Catholics have, like that's superfluous. It's only the Bible, just the word of Christ. And I think there's
the Marianism and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a Latin term for it, but kind of the same way where like it's something that I wrote about a couple years ago. I think that was shortly after I moved out of when me and my wife moved out of living with you is when I just kind of hit the wall, and I had that experience where I thought I was having a heart attack. It was a panic attack, but I went too far, and I thought I was going to die, and it kind of made me really reconsider how I was looking at the world, how I was living. Still, maybe didn't necessarily take the message to heart immediately, maybe as I should have, but I'm starting to reconsider and kind of look at Christianity and religion in general, like the Jewish tradition, or like I bought like the Tanakh, and I brought the Quran, and I'm just reading it just to like kind of look at it with new eyes. And part of that was the book Dominion, which we both read, which is part of the reason I wanted to talk to you, because we both read Dominion by Tom Holland, which is kind of a secular history of Christianity, as well as Paul Kingsnorth's Against the Machine, which I think both kind of have elements of this Christian and I guess more broad religious revival that we're seeing right now. And I guess I wanted to talk to both of those books to you, because I think they have some really interesting themes that are relevant to this conversation. And I think they're both good jumping off points, because I think we both liked the books, but found the endings to be a little lacking.
Yeah, there was, so start with Tom Holland's book. It was, I think he's good at his timing, because I think he hit that book right when the Christian revival was starting, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I found the book, it's interesting. As a historian, you think he would be more neutral, but I really got a deep sense from it that he was impressed by Christianity. Even if he started as not as a Christian himself, he showed a lot of admiration for it. I think he was almost surprised by what he discovered
in terms of the influence. I think called like it's the water that Westerners live in, like fish, and we just don't even see it, but it is everywhere. I think that, and again, the disappointing ending. I think it's changed more than he realizes. I think we're having a revival right now at the same time that it's Christianity has been on its probably worst downward slope since I don't know, maybe the Reformation. It's getting a real setback, but when I was reading it, I felt almost liturgical about it. Like it really was moving all the different stories, and he didn't stand off any edges. I wouldn't call it anything like it's hagiographic or anything about Christianity, but he had a great love for it. And I believe I've read he himself has actually returned to the church as well. Anglicanism, since he's a Brit. But yeah, I thought the ending it kind of petered out a bit, and I have some thoughts about that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things that really struck me first off is because, and again, like maybe this is like a self-selection thing because I read like, Dawkins and Hitchens and a lot of these atheist, writers and like, anti-Christian, like a lot, like some of these people you mentioned, very 60s, the Christianity is war and the Crusades, we all know the standard lines, which is not like totally untrue. It's not like they're coming up with that out of nowhere. But as you were talking, it really made me kind of realize it's like the first, at least that I'm aware of, the first time that there's been like, or that I've personally read, a Western scholar who looks at Christianity with like a semi-neutral academic eye, neither trying to be deconstructive or, as you said, like, a part of the water you swim in, and trying to prove it as like, some of the older generations might have, and like kind of looking at the Christian and or Western tradition with this kind of historian's academic eye, kind of like from the side of like postmodernity, looking at what Christianity was historically, which ironically, as you and probably the audience knows at this point, I'm like a Doorcast nerd for history, and ironically, the more neutral, dry academic tone made me more amenable to Christianity just because it's grounding Christianity in history as opposed to like when I was a kid, that was kind of my problem. It's like, well, all the interesting stuff in the Bible happened 2,000 years ago and it's just been coasting, but it's been a development for, up until maybe the last 100 years or so. I mean, I don't know where you want to call the if with Nietzsche or whatever, with the death of God in the 19th century or whatever, but that's kind of what really struck me about it. And we'll get to the ending. I do feel like the ending kind of stumbled since I don't know. I feel like he maybe didn't want to like say, we need to return to Christianity, or couldn't say that, or he thought he was trying to be dry and academic and be neutral, but that's what struck me about it for sure.
I think I read it not too long after I had converted, or I guess maybe not converted, but started studying it. Came back to Christianity and reading the Bible and praying. I think it's a really great introduction for anyone who's interested in Christianity. Like I said, it's neutral. It doesn't carry the normal snideness you get from academia these days about Christianity. But yeah, it's their warts and all. I mean, he does talk about some horrid things that have been done in the name of Christ. He doesn't pull back at all. But I think the problem with the ending of the book, because he talks about the 1960s and the 70s.
Yeah.
And he goes into wokeism a bit. He talks about the new atheists, Dawkins et al. And there's sort of attack on it. But I think what he's trying to do at the end is try to maybe reach a little too far. At that point, it's kind of like, well, no, Christianity is still the water we swim in, but I don't necessarily know what it is, because I was reading the Bible cover to cover. I was struck by how many references
I wasn't even aware of. Like all of Abraham Lincoln's speeches are basically just out of the Gospels, and then so Shakespeare. There's all these normal references, but I just don't see
even
these references
Christopher
anymore.
Hitchens said
Yeah,
that to be ignorant of Christianity is to be ignorant of Western culture.
and I think these days there's a final push from the atheists and the secularists to actually finish that process off once and for all. And I would think if you took some random 12-year-old right now and threw a Bible quote at them and say, or just you say an Abraham Lincoln speech and say, hey, do you know the house divided itself cannot stand comes from which of the Gospels? And he'd be like, huh? Whereas before, everybody would have got that reference. Everybody would have the background. And I think Tom Holland he's trying to hold on at the end. Just hold on, say, no, it's still there. And I think we're in the final stages of losing it before hopefully God willing gets reviled.
Just for the audience who hasn't read the book, basically Tom Holland's premise is like, and it's one of that I'm actually, there's a certain degree that I believe or am sympathetic to, like secular humanism, as you mentioned, or liberalism, progressivism, wokeness, whatever you want to call it. It's like a secularized version of Christianity. And to a certain degree, like, I think he is directionally correct. I don't know if I agree with the way he put it, because I mean, there is something to be said about how with any of these, like progressivism, it is a lot, like you said, like the secular humanism, it's Christian ethics of, forgiveness, the first shall be last. It's kind of anti-hierarchical, a lot of these different things. I think there's something there. And maybe like the Christian drive towards universalism. I think that there is something there. I wonder if maybe because he is of that generation, he's just too close to the 60s and 70s and after the 60s and 70s to really be objective, because I do really feel like it fell apart. And then he had like a digression about how like Islamic terrorism was also like it kind of went a little off the rails near the end, for sure.
He was definitely trying too hard, and I think secular humanism, my thoughts I had about that was that he doesn't fully understand it. I think he's a little younger than my parents, so I think he's in his mid to late 60s. So not X, maybe the younger end of boomer. But what I've seen from secular humanists having grown up and within it is that one, you're not given the connection back to Christianity, so you're not aware of it at all. You just get these things and you don't know where they come from. The second thing is also been a Buddhist is I see a lot of Eastern thought was brought into secular humanism. To me, it's a lot of the turn the other cheek taken to its extreme is a very Buddhist idea. You never ever fight back for any reason. If you read the Old Testament, you actually do fight back sometimes, sometimes to a horrible point, but there is a little bit of you can defend yourself. And other things like that I think the boomers kind of combine those things. And also I think secular humanism has really kind of faded away. The modern left is so aggressive and almost pro-violence. I think even secular humanism has dropped off. It may have given birth to wokeism, but I think then they just cut the cords after that. So I just don't see it having the influence anymore that he thinks is out there. I agree. I think it's a generational thing, but he's not quite aware yet that world is done. And we're on to a whole different level of hyper-secularism with no connection at all to the past. And I think, again, he's just trying to hold on there at the end, right? Yeah, no, it's still there somewhere. I'm like, I don't know, Tom. I'm not so sure about that.
Well, it's, again, like, I do think there is something to the basis, because I don't think there's anything outside of, I think there's more and more outside influence, but it's influence on a essentially Christian culture. Because and I think of like the Black Lives Matter protests had an almost religious framing to them.
Oh,
A lot of
films,
a lot of
absolutely.
it was and that's just for example, or a lot of the framing of, like, I think of these, like, boomer musicians who have almost like these Christ-like affectations, and the way that, like, especially the baby boomer generation will talk about these people. And I think it's that desire for that transcendent figure. And at least to me, like, I do think you're right that there does seem to be a bifurcation between, like, um the liberal tradition, which is like the secularization of Christianity, versus I don't know what you call, like, the more the illiberal tradition that's returning. And I don't think that's necessarily exclusive to the left, but a return to a more tribal and pagan
Yeah.
sensibilities, which, I think Tom Holland really accurately talked about how Christianity brought, like, a peace and a universal social contract to Europe and, other places that it came to, which I think you're right there. Like, you can't really square that circle of maybe these two disparate poles that we're seeing, and or, like, again, I don't know if he just, like, didn't want to full on say, hey, we need to return to Christianity or what. But and I think King's North had maybe a similar problem, which is strange because I know he is an Orthodox Christian.
Yeah. Yeah. Kingsnorth's book.
Against the Machine, for the audience, it's an interesting book. I would definitely check it out.
It's kind of funny. I think he was almost approaching those of us who've been kind of into the space for a while, the Ted Kaczynski space, that kind of understand, we didn't call it the machine. There's different names out there, but understand that we're part of something that we don't have control of anymore. And there's things kind of just eating humanity. So King's North almost came to this from a different direction and came to the same conclusions. I mean, he's not going to go, start mail bombing people, I don't think, but
Hope so.
The postage rates out of Ireland are pretty high. I can't really afford it unless we buy more books. But no, he's a very good, peaceful man. I don't think he'd want to anyway. He's much more like the isolate, leave myself alone. I don't want to be part of the machine. I want to disconnect as much as I possibly can. So he references a whole bunch of different people that I have the book in front of me, but that normally people who come from that space, from the Kaczynski area, would not probably be aware of. So it's really good at kind of spreading, like, oh, okay, there's these other folks who have the same idea. But again, I think one of the problems with this space, with him, and I was looking at Rodgers' the Mentic option as well, which is a similar idea where return by isolation. So the Mentic option for Rodgers was look at the monasteries and emulate the monastery system. As the tide of secularism comes and wipes out Christianity, you need to go back and reset and gain your strength in isolation so you can come back out later and re-enchant the world, re-Christianize the world. Both of them have this, I think the weak point is they're kind of weak on solutions, but I go back and forth. Sometimes it'd be good to be more confrontational now, but then you're just right back into culture wars and you're just spending a lot of time just screaming at each other. But I also don't want to be a coward to be completely isolated either. I mean, I can go to church on my own. I can pray in my house on my own. I'm really not much of an evangelizer. I'll talk to anyone who's open-minded about it, like yourself, and people with backgrounds in it. But I don't know. I feel like Kingsworth was almost a little scared again. Yeah, like I said, to finish off his thoughts. I think he was either trying to be academic or maybe not trying to alienate a non-Christian audience, but knowing his Orthodox background, I was just waiting for the chapter, waiting for the Christian chapter. I'm waiting for it. Tell me about the Orthodox. And he hints here and there, but he never really follows through. And I feel like he could have had he could have stepped up to the plate and just kind of finished off his thoughts about that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that he kind of only talked about becoming an Orthodox Christian obliquely, which I
Mhm.
guess to a certain degree I get. Like faith is, it's a personal thing as well as I think he I think he lives in Ireland. He comes from that English tradition
Mhm.
where you don't want to maybe necessarily be as prescriptive in that sense. But I do again feel like it's he I don't know if it was a confidence thing because I just remember like all the other chapters of the book felt very strong with very clear arguments, what he was setting up, describing like because I feel like he's able to describe the problem very well. Like Ted Kaczynski described the problem very well. If
Mhm.
he called it industrial society, much in the same way that Holland describes the historical context that Christianity existed in the Western world, and again up to maybe the 19th century is when maybe it had still significant cultural sway.
Mhm.
Probably died in the 20th century as like that universalism. Maybe the world wars killed it. Who can say?
Yeah.
Um, and here's the thing: I do have a lot of sympathy for it because I've come up with that same problem in my writing myself. It's like you can very accurately describe the problem. You can say, "Here's what's worked in the past," but it's a tall order to say, "All right, here's what we should do." Because I've come to the similar conclusions. It's not totally dissimilar from the layoff house. It's okay, you have to start local and
Yeah.
start small, have your community, be secure in yourself as a person, your worldview, your spirituality, be it traditional religion or something else, have a community and then build out. Because it almost feels like it's like a neo-paganism thing where we're becoming much more tribal and having all these holistic beliefs, and we lack that universality that comes with Christianity or that
Mhm.
came with Islam, or like that's these larger universalist religions. And it's definitely a tall order to try to figure out. So I'm not necessarily faulting them for it because I don't necessarily have a solution either.
Either they don't. I mean, they have again. I think the solution on an individual level, they know what they're doing and what they want to do, but there's a reluctance to give broad solutions. Like, okay, everybody run back to the country and start farming. Well, many of us can't do that. We'd be terrible farmers. Or, everyone run off to an Orthodox monastery. Well, I got a mortgage. I can't just up and go. I got a job. So I think King's North was more about giving people a shift in mindset as opposed to definitive solutions. And or unplug as much as you can from the internet, eschew from using AI as much as you can. He's not going to say everyone move to Ireland and become his neighbor. And I think that the solution's going to just change on the person, but um, also been made a whole other separate book for here's a whole another 200 pages of things you could do. Maybe he just got to the point where okay, if I do that, I'll never finish this bloody thing. So I think it was more like a shift in mindset, but then people can then take that shift and customize it for their life.
Yeah, I think because I ended up buying, I have this right here, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future by Father Seraphim Rose, because he talked about it um, in that book, and it's something that made me very curious because between King's North, or because I think what did I say, like he's like gentrified Ted Kaczynski, in that sense. But there's a lot of interesting writers right now who seem to be dealing with that problem of the death of liberalism, which was kind of secularized Christianity. So it's like the final death throes of that older universalist tradition. And as we mentioned, it's not perfect. I'm not one of these people who are like, actually the Crusades are justified or whatever. I don't think that it was like, this uniquely evil thing either. I think it's just kind of how people used to do politics, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But it's you wonder like, what it's going to look like in the future. Will it be some reassertion? Because actually, like, I do think if we can right the ship economically, like, I actually think that liberalism has potentially a lot of gas in the tank if things, can be at least stabilized economically. But barring that, I wouldn't be surprised if there was like a mass return to Christianity, since you did see ebbs and flows of religiosity, like the Puritans, for example, which were some of the earliest like New England settlers, were a reaction against a perceived drop in religiosity. Because also, like you said earlier, like if you were to talk to a 10-year-old, 15-year-old now, and you say 7 years ago, they wouldn't know it was Abraham Lincoln, much less that it was a reference to the Bible. But a couple hundred years ago, would somebody have known what level of biblical literacy would they have other than like going to church, hearing these stories, if they're even literally literate? So I think these things do ebb and flow. What form it will return in, I don't know. The neo-paganism, and not like people dancing around trees and shit. Neo-paganism, I mean like holistic, tribalistic, all against all paganism is what scares me.
Yeah. The push for that is going to be the accelerationists, just like, they even think the Christians are weak. Yeah, they want to go straight back to Zeus fighting Ra or whatever it is. I think I agree with the economics. If they can ever, I don't know if they can, but the main thing driving all this is just the precarity of everybody. We know so many people who've been through unemployment multiple times recently who are still unemployed. And, one stumble, one few bad weeks, and you lose everything. You can't build anything on this. And that's what's making people really turn against liberalism. And if there's no stability, then I go find something else. But the Christian revival, and it's hard to say how big it is. I mean, we certainly, at my now former church, read my piece. My church got boobered, to explain that one. I won't go through the story again right now, but I'm still kind of hot around for new stuff. Plus, actually, I might help found a church here shortly. But the revival is definitely people going, well, let's go back to maybe where things started to turn wrong. And I think what's also nice about it too, not only all the religious aspects, but also one of the reasons I was drawn to was a social aspect as well too. I wanted more in-person contact. I mean, I see you and your wife and our other friends often, co-workers. But other than that, like everyone else, I'm just on my bloody phone all the time. And the reason my Substack is kind of neglected right now, I read a lot, but I don't write as much or even comment, is me trying to do more in-person things. I want that small local village. And I think with AI kind of eating everything, I mean, now you don't know even what you're looking at anymore. That's true. And that's even for mainstream websites, news websites, that it's going to be a nice way for people to facilitate getting back into a face-to-face culture. And along with the strong religious aspects, Christianity, I'll even be charitable. I mean, any good religion is good for that. Get out of the house, go see some people, go out somewhere on your Saturday or Sunday or Friday, depending on your flavor of religion. Like all the trad bros are like, oh, we take Constantinople. Like, why just bring a coffee cake first? Talk to some people. That's really, start there. We'll reconquer the Middle East in a few centuries, but start with, as they say, touching grass. And I think that's another aspect of this too, is it reconnects you, it helps break you out of yourself, because our culture is so massively self-absorbed and encourages it to be self-absorbed. And two, it really gets you out of the house and talking to real people. And people who are religious there, of course, there's ups and downs as well. For the most part, I find so far, everyone is positive. you were with church with me a few weeks ago, and those people are huggy as all heck. I mean, you walk in, you're just hugbound. So, and it's good. I mean, from someone with a negative background in his mind, it's like, oh, this actually just feels good. You look forward to walking the door.
That's one of the things that I feel unconsciously at first, but for a long time, consciously trying to recapture
Yeah.
that sense of community. And sometimes it was annoying. You're probably starting to understand the phenomenon of church ladies, and how they will be in your business. But it's one of those things, like, I forget, I heard where the quote came from, but, like, inconvenience is the price of community.
Mhm.
And that's, I think, something people are wanting more and more, especially post-COVID. Since that's, well, when you're saying, like, actually physically meeting, what was making me think of is, funny enough, like, I went to church with you a couple weeks ago now, for the first time willingly, if it wasn't like my sister's wedding or your confirmation or
Yeah.
something like that, for probably over a decade. And of all the sermons that could have been, he was talking about the parable of, Jesus going into this great temple, and like, oh, how great is this? And like, well, in a couple years, how long it'll be until, not one stone will be laid upon another stone. And lo and behold, like 70 years later or so, it was that second temple was destroyed. But the Christian concept of, wherever two people meet in Christ's name, that is the church. That is the kingdom of heaven. And I think that's something that will probably become more and more attractive to people, as it's much, much more easy to become connected in a like very superficial sense, but it means less and less, and really feels to be like increasing like a hyper individualized Radio Rwanda type of thing, where it's just making everybody so hateful. And to me, that's what I've been rediscovering, the Christian ethic, even though if I don't necessarily call myself a Christian right now, of something that is like both universal but also easy to have a specificity to and reinvent with every generation. So I don't know. Will that be the case? Will it be literal Christianity? Will it be like a new kind of folk religion that has aspects of Christianity, New Age? Who knows? To me, that's very much better than the alternative, since it seems everybody's pretty much burnt out on this hyper individualism thing. Since I don't know, I was talking earlier about this idea of like, some Netflix type service where you can add all the tags that you want, and have a movie spun up for you with, the amount of electricity that it would take to, like, fuel a small city. Is how much deeper can we go with hyper individualism?
I think we've hit the back of it. I mean, yeah, there really is we're already doing things like pushing for like euthanasia, and not even for like terminally ill. It's like, oh, you're depressed, go and kill yourself. I mean, where else do you go after that? Like, you're so individualized that your life is basically meaningless. And like people are now seeing there is no light at the end of the tunnel. You've hit the back of the tunnel, let's turn around and go back the other direction. And yeah, there is something, like I said, the inconvenience. My previous church, I was serving as an acolyte. I was up at the altar, and which is a fantastic experience. Again, it was one of those things where I just fell into this. One last Easter, I'm just sitting there, kind of hanging around, and Father's like, "Hey, what are you doing right now?" Wait for mass. What do you think I'm doing? He's like, "You want to be crucified today?" So 10 minutes later, or 5 minutes of training, I'm there wearing a cassock and chasuble, going, "What are we doing up here? Oh, carrying this cross." Yeah, and they're like, I don't want to go. I have to go up there. And then I get in the car, like, okay, I'm fine. So, man, I want to sleep in on Sundays. I want to go for a hike. Then I tell myself, no, I'm going there to serve the Lord and to serve that community, that congregation, because for a proper mass, you need X amount of people up there, certain types of masses. And okay, get out there, go talk to people all different ages. We have everyone from 1 month old to 97-year-olds, and everyone's together. And
I think as AI eats everything, yeah, I think people are going to, they can't go any farther. There's no place else to go individually, and everything on the phone is going to become unreal or at least not reliable. So I think weirdly enough, AI may actually kill the machine as everyone just kind of says, yeah, we can't do this anymore. And we're going to turn around and go the other way.
Well, it makes sense, much as like, it's the how much piss in a public pool before it's just you're swimming in piss, and that's kind of how social media increasingly, or like that whole world feels of like how much bots can be on a platform before it's just what is even the point? It just drives people away. Like that there has to be a point of diminishing returns. I've already noticed that just on platforms like YouTube. Substack seems to be pretty good about it since it's written word, but just like some of the AI slop of this is just obviously AI generated, AI script, AI voice.
Yeah.
So it's possible that we'll hit diminishing returns, either that or like, I think, liberalism kind of only works when things get better forever. And if there's not economic, and I don't even really think that's a judgment call, that's like a fundamental presupposition of liberalism, that there will always be, things will always get better economically. There will always be more freedom, and there will always be, a new technology. If that starts to go down, the whole thing kind of falls apart.
Yeah, the expanding forever, if there's a limit, and especially the limit for the human soul. And yeah, we've hit the very end of the tunnel, and the folks are trying to come back to the other direction. And Christianity was the answer for me. I get that's not for everybody. I'm not a good evangelizer, but I'm still respectful enough of people's spaces. But I would encourage anybody to, if it's not religion, just get out there. I mean, join the Elk Lodge. Heck, I was 2 months ago, I was at the American Legion Hall with a friend of mine. And again, like, a space with people in it. It's weird. It became so strange, but the push for individualism killed so many of those little communities that now is the time to bring them back. Because if liberalism dies, we're going to have either a right-wing authoritarian culture or a left-wing authoritarian culture, or more likely for a while a wild swing between one and the other and one and the other and one and the other. And you got to weather the storm somewhere. I mean, you can weather it with the church and with your friends.
Yeah, and that's I do want to say that too, because I also do worry about some kind of more reactionary backlash. Since I'm not somebody who's like, wow, liberalism is where it all went wrong. There's a lot of good things about it, but like you said, there are limits to it. And I'd like to see a lot of these more liberal, modern, or secular aspects integrated in. What that will look like, it'll still be still TBD. I do really kind of feel like you said it's going to be probably wild vacillation, probably for the next bare minimum 10 years. But who can say? I mean, you said something about how you can't tell how big the Christian revival is. We're really only a couple years into it, and these are things that are often measured in decades, if not centuries. So
I think a lot of people are getting a little too overexcited right now. I mean, it works for me. I'm extremely happy that this happened to me. It's been life-changing. We still see, we saw new faces all the time at my old church, the new one. I'm still seeing new faces there. The deacon from my previous church, his ex-bishop finally talked him into doing church planting, so I'm going to be helping him with that here next few years. We here has people all over the place who want to join him. So I think it's going, there's a lot of people hyping up online like, oh, Christianity's back. I'm like, yes, but like you said, it's going to be a lot of people will come in, not everyone will stick, and it's going to take a while. And I don't think it's going to be like the old days where, the 1950s, where everybody has a church they go to. I think it's going to be revived, but it's going to be a core group of people who take it very, very seriously, and not necessarily a bad thing.
Mhm.
You know, you're not watering down with endless round of fruitcake surprises or whatever, where it's going to people really take it, their prayer seriously, the worship seriously, and people aren't doing it just because they feel like they have to. I think that's what really did kill a lot of Christianity in the 20th century. Not only things like Darwinism and the horrors of World War One and Two and all that, but also I think there's a deep sense of obligation, and no one really was properly explaining why people should go. I think that also, when I was a kid, we went for like a year, and that was it. And no one really told us why we were going, and then no one really told us why we stopped going. My parents were like, we're doing this, okay. Now we're not doing this, okay. And we never got any instructions, even though they themselves grew up in it. They never explained anything. So we don't want to have a church like that where you just go do this. Why? Because we have to. Okay. That's not going to help anybody. So I think there's a way to do a church better now that I think is going to give us an opportunity to continue to revitalize as long as the churches and the clergy keep their eye on the ball.
Yeah. Well, whatever it'll look like, I think it's going to be. It's a process, but I think it's better than the alternative. I think more and more people are hopefully coming to that conclusion.
I hope so. It's been a good 18 months for me, 2 years almost, and
you definitely seem a lot more happy and more at peace. So I've definitely been really happy to see that change for you.
Oh, I mean, you and your wife, even before I told you, I didn't think you guys were noting I was changing, because I didn't tell anybody for a while because I didn't know how to. I came from such an atheist background, it was almost an embarrassment. But that too, I guess one of the last things I want to mention is the amount of people who have accepted this. I say, oh, by the way, I'm doing this now. I started with a lot of fear because I was taught to fear it, and now it's like, wow, a lot of people who are just happy for me, and don't be afraid to change.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good note to kind of wind things down on. Do you have anything you want to promote? Are you planning on getting back into the saddle writing on Substack soon? I always say subscribe to Chesterton's Fence because he has some interesting perspectives, and check out his books. But do you have anything on the horizon that you're planning that might come out soon?
Not for Substack. I do have some. I did revitalize it. I had started originally, jumped on there to do some book promotion, then got pulled to the political commentary, and then as I spent the past few years kind of changing from a left-wing perspective to a more conservative perspective, writing about that, I took a lot of that stuff down and after the fact, it just sounded kind of whiny to me. I'm like, I don't want to be a public whiner. It helped me vent. It helped me find a lot of things out about myself, but it was time to kind of bring that back under the blanket, so to speak. But I have to figure out what direction I want to go with it. I do want to write more about my religious experiences, but I also want to keep things positive. I also want to do some more book reviews, especially because I'm going to start rereading some old stuff in my library to save money. I'm like, oh yeah, I've read that in ages. Let's get some thoughts about that.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I think we could definitely use a lot more of that type of thing on the platform.
Now, we do have another book in the works, which actually your wife has read the first 30,000 words and give me some feedback on, because I got kind of stuck. So I need to sit down with her soon so we can talk that out. I think she's got some ideas too. So hopefully by probably the end of next year, 2026, I think I should have the next book printed and ready to roll.
Well, very nice. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on. I just want to ask you the final question I always ask a guest. So what is something that makes you feel hopeful for the future?
What makes me feel hopeful is I keep reading and hearing that even before us, like the people in like the high school age or early 20s now have really, they've turned their back on the boomer culture. We talk about the hyper individualism. They want to go back. Like, these are people who want to go to church. They want to get married. They want to have a positive life. They want to have a stable life. They've seen all the damage that was done, and they're rejecting that, and they want to revitalize things. And I think as those of us who kind of grew up with the end of liberalism and that hyper individualism kind of, well, Gen X and millennials really kind of got the shaft. But I think the folks after us, again, they saw the limit and they're like, no, we're going to make things better. I think there's a really good chance there that as they, you know, they start to value stability and connection in a way that we did not or are just starting to. They're growing up, I think, with the upswing, whereas I think our generation's got the downswing. And my age, I might not live long enough to see it all the way through, but I think they got a chance. I think they have a really good chance to turn everything around for us, and they're gonna be happy. And that gives me great encouragement that I think it needs to be okay for this country in the long run.
Well, David, that's a beautiful sentiment. Thank you so much for coming on.
Indeed. Thank you.